We reached out to Alison Roman, and something about me is that on YouTube, I will watch any human cook any dish. I don't know what it is. I love watching people make food. I make food occasionally, but not all that often relative to how much YouTube I watch. And there is nobody better at cooking on YouTube than Alison Roman. And I should say, it's not just YouTube. She's also a chef and a food writer. She is known for some of her viral recipes like the stew and the cookies and some best-selling cookbooks, including my favorite, Nothing Fancy, and more recently, Sweet Enough. She kind of has a finger in just about everything.
Yeah, and I think most relevant to us is that Alison is what I would consider kind of like a very online person. She sort of came up during the sort of social media age as a person who sort of developed this kind of very relatable online persona. And she's also had a career that's been shaped in some ways by the internet. She experienced, an episode of sort of criticism or backlash a few years ago online, which led her to leave her job at the New York Times and eventually start her own newsletter. So she's kind of experienced the highs of online fame and also some of the lows. And maybe most relevant to us and what we're going to do on the show today is that she loves to give advice.
That's right. She recently started an advice podcast. It's called Solicited Advice, where she answers listeners' questions, not unlike what we do on this segment, which we call Hard Questions. So we're thrilled to have her here today. Let's bring her in here.
Alison Roman, welcome to Hard Fork.
Hello, happy to be here.
How are you?
I'm well, how are you?
I'm great. I'm so thrilled that you are here today. Thank you so much for doing this.
Oh my gosh, of course. I love podcasts. I love your podcast.
This one comes from a listener whose name is also Alison from Arizona, and she's very concerned about protecting her child's image from facial recognition technology. But recently, when she went to register her kid for daycare, she learned that she might have to choose between getting childcare and her kid's privacy. Here's Alison.
Hi, Hard Fork. After months of being on a wait list, a spot for my 2-year-old opened at one of my top choices of daycare. As a precondition of registration, I was asked to sign a photo release, giving the daycare rights to use my child's image in promotional materials, including online content. I raised concerns that images uploaded to the internet could be available to train AI facial recognition technology, but the response was that I could sign the photo release or not take the daycare spot. Why is it okay for childcare providers to demand, through a photo release, the ability to provide this training data to the algorithms, potentially impacting their future privacy? And is there anything that can be done?
Oof.
Alison Roman, what do you think? What do you make of this?
I mean, it's sort of like two questions, right? Like, is this okay? And also, what do I do?
Yeah.
And I don't know how hard it is to get into these schools. I'm sure very. And, you sort of have to like weigh what are they going to do with the information? Does that con outweigh the pro of them going to this school that I really want them to go to that feels like it's going to enrich their life and make my life better as well as a parent? I don't know. I sort of, not to sound nihilistic, but I sort of feel like with all surveillance and AI and facial recognition and cameras and all stuff, it's like we've already lost.
Yeah.
Like there are cameras on every corner. People are taking pictures of us. Like I'm sort of like, when I go to the airport, I belong to Clear, Delta One, TSA. I'm like, get me into the plane. You know what I mean?
Right.
At this point, I don't know that like not signing up for Clear is going to be the thing that like takes it down. They're going to do it anyway. So I don't know.
Yeah, that's actually a thing that people have written about, the concept of privacy nihilism, where it's like, we already lost. Why does it matter?
Yeah.
I have a kid. I do post photos of my kid on a private, social media account, but I don't put them publicly on the internet. And there are a couple reasons I've chosen, my wife and I have chosen to do that. One of them is this sort of like AI of it all, but there's also just stuff that has nothing to do with AI. There are lots of like predators on the internet, and I think that's something that a lot of parents are worried about as well. And the thing that actually tipped me over the line on this, because we were sort of grappling with what to do with this, is seeing that Mark Zuckerberg did not post photos of his kids' faces on Instagram. He would like put little emojis over them, which a lot of celebrities also do with their kids. And I was like, well, if Mark Zuckerberg has chosen not to put his kids' faces on the internet, like that probably indicates that I shouldn't
if Mark
do
Zuckerberg
either.
isn't like, it's fine,
right.
Then like, we know it's not fine, but like, even when he's like, it's not fine.
Yeah. I guess my advice for our listener would be, like I think it's a red flag that the daycare won't accommodate this request.
That's,
right?
as a parent, that is a great rebuttal. Yes.
It's a pretty reasonable thing to ask. Like, a condition of sending my kid to daycare shouldn't be that their images get used on the internet. So, like, I don't know. I would drill down a little bit to figure out, well, what exactly are you planning to use this for? You know, is it like a promotional Instagram account? Could you just use photos of the other kids? Like, why do you need my kid's face specifically?
Yeah.
But yeah, that seems to me like an indication that this is not a place that that may be willing to work with you on other things.
If you can't bring peanut butter to class, you should also be able to opt out of the like AI facial recognition. You know?
Yeah, I agree with you on that, Kevin. If they're going to be unreasonable about this, they're going to be unreasonable about something else. And I do think it's worth making a stink over it, because it's not just the AI training. It's also like, you're going to take my child's gorgeous face and use it to sell your preschool. Like, I should actually just have a say in that, right? Or like,
100%.
Give me a discount on your daycare or something. So that's, you know.
Am I getting compensated for this usage?
Yes.
Yeah. What's your day rate?
That's what I would do. But
listen,
I
would do a lot for free or reduced price daycare. That stuff is expensive, you know?
Yeah. But I also do want to underline something that Alison said, which is like, a camera is going to take a photo of your child's face somewhere, and you're not going to be able to opt out. And I don't want to sound like a nihilist, because I do think that we should, fight against surveillance everywhere.
We should.
Probably something to keep in mind. All right. Our next question is about what happens when people are rude to digital assistants like Siri. Let's hear the clip.
Hi, my name is Nick, and I live in Oakland, California. My son loves tools, so I recently took him to a hardware store to look around, where he became fixated on a magnetic grabber tool. While in the process of explaining to my son what magnets were and how they worked, I accidentally triggered Siri via my Apple Watch. It misheard what I said about magnets and thought I had instead called it a homophobic slur. Siri lightly scolded me for my behavior and sent me some links to resources from the Human Rights Campaign. This mishap made me realize how easily digital assistants misunderstand us, but it also raised a fear. Does how we treat our digital assistants get tracked and influence how they interact with us? For example, if someone keeps telling Siri to shut up, will it learn to give shorter responses over time? As a result of this fear, I even caught myself scolding others for being rude to my digital assistants. Am I weird for thinking about this, or is this a legitimate concern?
I mean, first of all, this man's Apple Watch is not just going to sit around and take it when slurs are being uttered in the Home Depot. Alison, how do you feel about like the way that people talk to their digital? Have you ever heard somebody saying something to their digital assistant and thought, I don't like the tone?
No, but I did used to date someone who was like very codependent on their digital assistant, which is like a very generous term. It was like Siri and Alexa. And it was like I'm like, can't you do anything on your own? I'm like, just Google it. Like if I'm either Siri or Alexa, I'm going to be like, read a book. But I think that like people being rude in general is really upsetting to me. And like, we shouldn't be rude even to our phones, because if you're speaking it out loud into your phone, someone around you is going to hear you. And even just hearing someone be rude to like, it's like, have you ever been to dinner with someone and they're shitty to the server? Nothing worse. Like truly nothing worse than that.
Yeah.
Such a deal breaker for any sort of relationship, friendship, partnership, anything. I can't imagine. And if you're like that with your digital assistant, then you're probably a shitty person to a server, I imagine.
Yeah, I agree. I am polite to all of my like AIs and digital assistants. I even caught myself. I got out of a Waymo like self-driving car the other day.
Oh my gosh, you're not getting in those. They're scary. Are you both in San Francisco?
Yes.
Yeah.
Wait, did you take a ride in one while you were here the other week?
No, but I saw them and I was like on mission, and I looked over and there's no one in the car, and I'm thinking, well, that's not going to end well.
I take them all the time, and I caught myself the other day, like as I was getting out, like thanking the driver of the self-driving car. I was like, thanks.
One time I told an Uber driver I loved them. I was getting out and I was like, love you, bye. I was like, what? Well, I think that here's what I do think is I think that the increase of digital assistants, be it an actual vehicle or a Siri or type thing, will make us more rude as people because we are going to have less and less empathy for the person that we're interacting with because it's not a person. So we're going to think of them as a machine, as a tool, as a whatever. Like then you get in an Uber and you don't say thank you because you're so accustomed to being in a Waymo or whatever those are called. And you're not saying thank you because there's no one there. Or you're like, oh, well, I'm just asking Siri something, so I'm going to talk to like my barista. You know, I think
Right.
it's going to desensitize us a bit, which I know
think
isn't
it totally
the question.
could. I also think, though, that like these systems will just like mimic human beings over time. And like most empathetic people are going to have trouble being mean to something that sounds like a person, even if you sort of know
I
in
hope
your
so.
heart that it's not.
Yeah, it's like when you remember when those videos came out of the robot dogs and people kicking the robot dogs. There were like these robot,
I can't believe they caught you doing that on video, by the way, Kevin.
But people were like kicking the robot dogs to show off how they could sort of get back on their feet, and people were like really upset that there were like videos of people kicking robot dogs. I think you're right, Casey. I think we're gonna feel weird talking as these assistants get smarter and smarter. We're just gonna feel stranger and stranger talking to them in like such a short and sort of, I don't know, like an unkind way.
Well, Kevin, let me ask you one thing, because I've heard parents say that they are extra nice to the digital assistants in their house because they don't want their kids to hear them being rude.
Absolutely.
So are you doing a lot of please and thank you to sort of, make an impression on your child?
I do, yeah, because he's listening now and he's watching me. And if I start like ordering around Alexa, then he's going to think it's okay to start ordering around his friends at daycare. That's my fear. And then I'll get kicked out and I'll have to go to the daycare where you have to sign up for surveillance.
Yeah, with their retinas get scanned at age 2. Yeah.
All right, let's move on to the next question. Yep. This one comes from listener Amanda Darby, who wants to know what we make of the risks of using a period tracker app. Let's play the clip.
Hi, Hard Fork. For context, I have been using a period tracking app for more than 10 years, so it knows a lot about my health, like when I did and didn't have periods, other aspects of my health like ovulation, mood swings, any irregularities in my cycle. But I don't think it's a stretch to say that someone could look at this data, perhaps say if it were subpoenaed in a particularly red state, and make inferences about decisions I've made regarding my reproductive health or experiences I've had that relate to my reproductive life. So my question is, what should I and other people who use period trackers be aware of and be thinking about when we think about this question? Thanks.
So obviously, Casey and I.
Yeah, I was going to say, you guys want to take this one?
Period tracker apps, but I'm curious what both of you make of this question.
Yeah, I mean, I do, and the way that I treat it is like a calendar. I do not. It prompts me all the time to ask how I'm feeling, my mood swings, my symptoms, my this, my that, and I never answer. And it'll ask me like pointed things, like it'll like go on a slide and be like, well, what about this? And like, have you done this today? Like, have you blah, blah, blah? And I never participate.
Yeah.
I had no idea that these apps were that nosy. Like, what do they want all that information for?
Well, I think they say they're using it to like give the user a better experience. So like if you're like, oh, it's day 3 of my period and it's really, really heavy and I feel like shit, they'll be like, that's really common. 83% of our users feel the same way. They use it as a way to say like, here's what's going on with your body. You have questions and here's our data, right? So from everyone who's using this, only 4% of women have felt this way. So you might want to go to a doctor.
Yeah.
Or whatever.
I did a little looking into this issue because I was curious about these apps, and it turns out that this has been an area where there's been a lot coming out over the past few years, especially after Roe versus Wade was overturned. A lot of people said, delete your period tracker app because this is going to be able to be subpoenaed and you could get in trouble for using one of these apps. There are privacy risks associated with these apps, some more than others. My colleague Kashmir Hill actually wrote a great article basically about whether this is a thing that people should be worried about. And the conclusion of the article was basically there are many other ways that governments, if they wanted to, or groups that wanted to incriminate people based on information about their periods, there are lots of other ways they could get that information. Some of them can track location. Some of them can, if you're texting a friend, like I just found out I'm pregnant, or maybe you did a Google search for Plan B, like those are the kinds of things that can be used. And so the conclusion of these privacy experts was, let's keep things in proportion. It's not just this is not the only way that if someone wanted to find out information about you and your pregnancy status, they could do it. But I'm curious if either you find that persuasive.
Yeah, I mean, that is persuasive to me. The thing that comes to mind is just we need a national privacy law. We don't want to get too wonky today, but something we've talked about before is that America is basically unique amongst developed nations for not having any national privacy law. So this is a case where we could just write legislation that says, hey, if you collect this kind of very intimate personal health data, you're actually not allowed to sell it to an advertiser like without someone's consent or something like that. So yet another reason I wish we had such a law.
Yeah.
All right. This next one comes to us from a teacher named Margot who lives in Ohio. She comes to us with a story about how some of her colleagues became concerned over how she used AI in an assignment she gave to her students, and she wants to know, are her colleagues right? Here's Margot.
So right before state test prep, I wanted to have the students analyze 2 pieces of poetry and compare and contrast the points of view as a common standard in Ohio. And this was not meant for deep analysis. This wasn't a poetry unit. It was something that I needed 2 quick pieces to practice the skill before the state test. And so I hopped onto ChatGPT 4 at the time, and I'm always trying to bring in marginalized voices into my classroom. And so I had it generate a poem from the perspective of an Indigenous person during the Trail of Tears, and then another poem from the perspective of a white colonizer. And I was going to have the students compare and contrast the points of view through the pieces. And I shared this idea with some of my colleagues, and I was met with a little bit of concern. And one of my colleagues suggested that this wasn't a great use of AI because I was, in essence, silencing the voices of already marginalized people by using a robot to create the piece of poetry. And voices that are already marginalized and silenced and ignored, to go above and beyond to create something from their perspective, it just wasn't sitting right with them. And it really gave me pause. And so I would love to hear your perspective on when, if at all, is it okay to use AI to generate literature for the students to read and analyze?
Oh my God. I have so many thoughts about this, but let's let our guest go first.
Oh my God, I have to go first? Okay, well, my thought is this doesn't sit well with me, is what I'll say. I think for so many reasons. Most of all, that there is so much literature that does exist that is authentic to people's real experiences. And the second we decide to just cut out the human and be like, well, we're just going to approximate it with this AI situation, that freaks me out so bad, I gotta say.
Yeah, I really agree with you on that one. When you think about what a large language model is, the people that built them took all the literature they could find, all the marginalized voices they could find, they fed it into this model.
And the non-marginalized voices.
And they didn't compensate any of those people. And now they're making a product that they sell for $20 a month. So it's sort of hard for me to imagine a worse insult to injury than to say
100%.
So we're just going to use ChatGPT to make a poem. So look, we have talked often on the show about we think there are lots of cool and fun ways that you can AI, and we will continue to explore those. But one place I think we can hold sacred, at least for now, is literature class. Let's just show the kids real literature and not the AI slop.
I'm going to defend our listener here a little bit. I share the concern about the sort of replacement of art, and especially art by marginalized people, with AI slop. In this case, this is not something that she is offering as a commercial product. She is not making any money on this. This is a classroom exercise to teach students how to compare and contrast pieces of poetry. It's not like somebody would be getting a royalty on this that is being deprived of it. So I think we really have to look at the economic harm here. But I do think it's important to disclose to the students that the thing they are writing is AI, and not to sort of make up some author's name and maybe that would create a fruitful discussion in the classroom about the ethics of doing this. My take on all this stuff about AI in the classroom, which has been the subject of so much debate over the last year or two, is just that we should be having the discussion, teach the controversy, essentially. And I think this would be a really good question to pose to the students.
But Kevin, do you know how many poems there are? Why do we need to use the AI for this? We are not. There's not a poem shortage in this country.
Listen, these are teachers. They're strapped for time. They don't have, what are they supposed to do? Go through a poetry anthology looking for the exact right piece?
It feels like microwave dinner to me. It's like, yeah, we're going to eat. And sure, we don't have the time. It's like, okay, well, at least we're eating dinner. It's like, well, no, there's a difference. And I do think that if you have the opportunity to educate your students, also, here are 5 really great Indigenous poets that you should be aware of. If this spoke to you, if you're interested in this story, their stories, here are some people you can look up. But why not just go with one of those poets in general? Just pick one. I think the second that we have to start being does this feel weird? Is this gross? Am I doing something wrong? The answer is probably yes, right? And it feels a little sticky to expose young people who are supposed to be learning and expanding their brains. Not that they're going to 15 years from now be wow, that one poem really changed my life, but it might for one person.
Yeah.
Sure.
Well, I'm outvoted here on this show, but Margot, I just want to let you know I'm with you. Just know that I've got your back.
Hey, that's the end of this clip. If you liked what you saw, head on over to our page and subscribe, and you can get the full podcast. We do a show like this almost every week on tech and the future. Head on over there now and subscribe.